So I've decided to go my own way. When I was 35 years old, I got married to the love of my life, my best friend even to this day. And what I imagined was days of dating and nights of romance and many holidays with family and friends. And then one of the things that we tried to do was go back to school together. So at 35, I decided, as well as he, to pursue this thing called graduate school. This thing that we thought would offer us more opportunities, and of course, I stand here today suggesting that it had. But along this journey, my husband decided, instead of just finishing my master's degree in psychology and social education, what I will do is go to med school. And my life changed forever. What I would suggest to you is that 35 years old is not the time that you decide that your life is going to become what I call a slinky. And this slinky life took me from a place called Oakland, California. Oakland, California, and they told me to make sure that I said California so that you didn't think I came from around the corner. Oakland, California, where I attended UC Berkeley, where I had adjusted my whole life, where we bought our first home. In fact, the first remodel we did ourselves, and we were there long enough to afford to pay for somebody else to do what we did over. And so I remember this conversation, and I remember sitting on the stairs and thinking, this can actually be fun and exciting. I had only lived in California my whole life. I grew up in Los Angeles. I spent my summers in San Diego. His family was from Sacramento. And we both met at this place called Berkeley. But now, as we shut the doors and the movers drive away, we move off to a place called Philly. Now, I know we're in Pittsburgh, and I know that's not one of the favorite places of people who live in Pennsylvania. However, Philly was my first stop. And it was the place where he pursued his post-bac program. And at the time, I had a global role. So at the time, I was traveling all over the world, so I'd come back on the weekends, he would study during the week, and then our life was just kind of a routine. And then he finished this program, and at that time, my life was still global, and so I have to tell you, although I had learned to live in the snow after lovely days in California, and after I had learned to take taxis to get around, we moved to this next place called Chicago. Now, Chicago was a beautiful place, and in fact, that move was because of me. So the first slinky from Oakland to Philly was because of him, and then the move to Chicago was because of me. So our life really is like a human slinky, and we kind of follow each other around. And then in Chicago, I had this role at an organization called Motorola. And I was traveling all around the world, coming home on the weekends. And then he applied, obviously, to this thing called medical school. This thing called medical school, that the place he wanted to go was to this place called the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. And it changed our lives again. Because at the time, and those of you who've been around this city for a while, know that there were two people who did diversity in this city who had formal roles. One was at a place called Highmark, and one was at a place called UPMC. And at the time, there was a third person. That position eventually went away, was at US Steel. So I looked into it, but I said, there's nothing there for me. There's generally only one role like mine. And then one day, while living in Chicago, we're sitting having dinner. By the way, I was with friends, and we were just sitting around chatting, and they said to me, there's this job in Pittsburgh called the Chief Diversity Officer of the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. Do you know anyone who might be interested? Of course I do. You'd leave Motorola and pack up everything you have here in Chicago? Of course I will. That's where my husband wants to go to school. So, like a slinky, we moved from Chicago. And by the way, I moved first because I moved here in February. And you should know that when I moved here in February, I learned that winter is not the time to move to Pittsburgh. At that time, I decided to move from this place called Chicago. We moved here into a place called Pittsburgh. He finishes medical school, and then he goes off to Cleveland. The slinky continues. So the thing that I want to tell you is this, very quickly, of how I've survived. Because every single one of these moves has required me to figure it out. Every city that I've lived in, I create this little thing called Power and Joy. And what it is a group of women who I randomly meet. And I say, wouldn't you like to be a person who starts a book club? And then we'll just take this little table and you pick an event, and then you pick an event, and you pick an event. And then we just kind of collectively do things that perhaps we all like. And you don't have to go to all of them, but you can participate in the ones that interest you. And so that's what Power and Joy has done for me in every city. That first group of women there with the wine, of course, was my first Power and Joy group from California. Then there's some Chicago and Philly and Cleveland. And here's Pittsburgh with one of my dear friends who's left us since this photo was taken, Miss Bernadette Turner, if you know her. And from there, I decided, okay, well, Power and Joy isn't the only thing that can sustain me, so then I went to the next place, and that was thinking about friendship. Because guess what? When you have a husband in residency and you have to go to the hospital, you actually have to have somebody as your case of emergency, and you don't think about that. You have parties at your house, and you have people like Ellen in Georgia, and people like Tasha Batch, and people like just people who will go with you to the beach. Friendship sustains me. In addition to that being friendship that sustains me, I would say that I also have an amazing set of activities that I participate in. Those things range from things like teaching. If those of you haven't taken my class, come and do so. It's Carnegie Mellon. I'm still teaching there on diversity because we all need to get better at this. I moved from teaching to things like activism. Now, you should know that if I've been in Pittsburgh, you haven't seen me be very active. And in fact, I told a group of people that I wasn't very political, and then I looked around my room and I saw all of these things, and I said, maybe I am pretty political. And then after that, volunteering. Women and Girls Foundation is probably one of my favorite things to do. Be here with you today. But mentoring, helping young people, trying to make a difference in the world is the way that I live my life. And for those of you who know me, I don't even know how I do it. But my family, ultimately, with my husband there in the background, and my mom and my dad and my nieces and nephews, holidays, celebrations, days and nights of happiness. So my words for you is we've been given each day to use as we will. We can waste it or use it for good. When tomorrow comes, this day will be gone forever. And in its place are the things we left behind. May they be things that encourage you, that inspire you, that surround you with happiness. And may you too find that person who gives you joy and becomes the best friend of your life for 30 years.